The relentless sun hung low over the sprawling Arizona desert, casting long, jagged shadows across the parched landscape as Dr. Elena Ramirez gazed out over the horizon. Each step across the scorching sand felt like a pilgrimage toward a destiny she could almost taste. The heat was oppressive, wrapping around the team like an invisible shroud, but it was no match for the fire of anticipation that burned within them. They had journeyed thousands of miles, guided by fragmented maps and whispered legends of a lost civilization buried deep beneath the dunes, a discovery that promised to redefine history. As they unloaded equipment from dust-caked vehicles, the air buzzed with the thrill of the unknown mingled with a trepidation none dared voice. Elena's fingertips tingled as she brushed against ancient petroglyphs etched into a nearby cliff face, the symbols eroded yet defiant against time. She glanced over her shoulder, a flicker of movement catching her eye, but saw only the endless expanse of sand and stone. A sense of unease settled in her stomach, an instinctual warning she tried to dismiss. After all, the desert was known for playing tricks on weary minds. Elena was a woman driven by an insatiable curiosity, and the shadow of her father's unfulfilled legacy, striving to achieve what he never could. Her sharp eyes missed nothing, and her colleagues respected her relentless dedication. Beside her worked Mark Thompson, a geologist whose rugged exterior belied the turmoil within. Haunted by the loss of his brother to the very earth he studied, Mark grappled with the irony of dedicating his life to the terrain that had taken so much from him. Sarah Patel, the team's linguist and cultural anthropologist, pored over inscriptions with a fervor that masked her own demons. The voices of a family who never understood her passions, who dismissed her pursuits as frivolous. Then there was Lucas Miller, a fresh-faced intern eager to prove himself, though shadows lingered beneath his bright eyes. The silence of the desert mirrored his internal loneliness, a fear that he could never quite shake. The team was a mosaic of brilliance and brokenness, each member unknowingly bearing the weight of personal histories that crept into their dreams. As twilight descended, the desert transformed into an otherworldly realm, the blistering heat giving way to a biting chill. The sky darkened to a deep indigo, stars piercing through the veil like ancient sentinels. The campfire crackled, its warm glow a fragile barrier against the encroaching darkness. The wind picked up, carrying with it a haunting melody that seemed to echo from the distant canyons, swirling around the team in an almost tangible embrace. Shadows danced at the edges of their vision, shapes shifting and coalescing into forms that vanished when looked at directly. The scent of sagebrush mingled with something else, an undercurrent of decay that had no place in the barren wilderness. The group huddled closer, their conversations dwindling into uneasy silence. Elena felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise, a primal response to an unseen presence. "Do you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide as they scanned the darkness. Mark shook his head, though his clenched jaw betrayed his unease. Lucas stared into the flames, his mind replaying the ghostly whispers that had stirred him from sleep the night before. On the third day, their perseverance was rewarded, or perhaps cursed. Nestled against a cliffside partially obscured by overgrowth, they discovered it. A massive stone door unlike anything they had ever seen. The surface was carved with unnerving precision, depicting twisted figures with elongated limbs and gaping mouths filled with sharp, interlocking teeth. The images seemed to undulate under the harsh sunlight, creating the illusion of movement. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she traced the unfamiliar symbols etched between the figures. "These don't match any known language," she murmured, a mixture of awe and dread coloring her voice. Mark ran his hand along the door's edge, noting the unnatural coldness seeping from the stone. "It's like it's alive," he said, pulling back abruptly. A sudden gust of wind whipped around them, sending a cascade of sand skittering across the rocks. The ground beneath them vibrated subtly, a low-frequency rumble that resonated in their bones. "Did you feel that?" Lucas asked, his voice barely audible. Elena's eyes were fixed on the door, a mixture of triumph and unease battling within her. "We've found something extraordinary," she declared, though a knot tightened in her stomach. That night, sleep eluded them. One by one, they succumbed to a restless slumber filled with vivid nightmares. Elena found herself wandering through endless subterranean corridors, walls adorned with eyes that followed her every move. Whispers echoed around her, indistinct yet urgent. Mark dreamed of the ground cracking open beneath him, tendrils of darkness pulling him into the abyss as his brother's voice called out in warning. Sarah stood in a void, ancient voices speaking through her, their language seeping into her mind like poison. Lucas faced the harsh glare of spotlights, crowds surrounding him, yet he remained unseen, his cries for recognition drowned out by deafening silence. They awoke drenched in sweat, the oppressive weight of their dreams lingering. As dawn broke, the team shared uneasy glances, the unspoken question hanging in the air. What had they uncovered? Compelled by a force they couldn't articulate, they returned to the door, determination overshadowed by an undercurrent of fear. The door seemed to beckon them, its grotesque carvings more pronounced, the toothed mouths curved into sinister smiles. With a reluctant consensus, they prepared to open the door. Using ropes and pulleys, they exerted force on the ancient mechanisms. The door resisted at first, groaning in protest before yielding with a resounding scrape that echoed across the desert. A rush of musty air escaped, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something metallic. The passage beyond was shrouded in darkness, an inky blackness that swallowed the beam of their flashlights. Undeterred, they descended into the depths, the walls closing around them like the throat of a great beast. The carvings continued inside, more intricate and disturbing, depicting scenes of sacrifice and worship to faceless deities. The air grew thick, each breath a labor. Suddenly, the entrance behind them slammed shut with a deafening boom, plunging them into darkness. Panic erupted. Mark pounded on the door, his fists bruising against the unyielding stone. Sarah's flashlight flickered, revealing fleeting glimpses of movement along the walls. "We're not alone," she whispered, her voice ragged. An otherworldly chorus of whispers filled the passage, growing louder, more insistent. Lucas's scream pierced the cacophony as shadowy figures emerged, their forms shifting and ethereal, eyes gleaming with malevolence. In the chaos, Elena grappled with a surge of adrenaline-fueled clarity. "Stay together!" she shouted, grabbing Sarah's arm. But the ground lurched beneath them, separating the team as cracks spiderwebbed across the floor. Mark was the first to fall, swallowed by a chasm that appeared at his feet, his terrified shout abruptly silenced. Lucas backed away, only to be enveloped by shadows that seemed to reach out and consume him. Sarah clung to Elena, her eyes wide with terror, but her body suddenly jerked back as unseen forces pulled her into the darkness. "No," Elena cried, lunging forward but grasping only air. Alone, she stood in the suffocating blackness, the whispers coalescing into a single, coherent message. "Join us." Summoning every ounce of strength, Elena reached into her pack, fingers closing around a flare. Igniting it, she hurled it into the abyss. The sudden blaze illuminated the chamber, revealing the true extent of the horrors. Walls lined with the desiccated remains of countless others, their faces frozen in perpetual agony. The shadows recoiled, and in that moment she ran. Her path twisted and turned, the architecture defying logic, but she pressed on, fueled by sheer will. Bursting through an unseen exit, Elena stumbled into the blinding light of day. Gasping for air, she looked back to find no entrance, only an unbroken expanse of rock. The desert was silent. The oppressive atmosphere lifted as if nothing had happened. The vehicles, the camp, all traces of the expedition were gone. Staggering forward, she spotted movement in the distance, a group of people approaching. Relief flooded her until they drew nearer. Dressed in archaic clothing, their expressions vacant, they reached out to her. "Welcome," one said in a language she somehow understood. The realization hit her like a blow. Time had shifted. She was no longer in her own era. The desert had not only swallowed her team, but had cast her into a forgotten past. The weight of isolation crushed her as she understood she was trapped, another lost soul claimed by the desert's insatiable hunger. As the figures closed in, Elena sank to her knees, a bitter smile forming. Her quest for discovery had led her here, to become part of the very history she sought to unveil, lost to time, her story never to be told.